The most dangerous thing anyone had ever said to the Titan Queen was not a threat. It was a compliment, not whispered in a dark hall, not hidden in encrypted channels, spoken out loud, in front of witnesses, by a human nobody had bothered to fear. And in that single heartbeat, the laws of 1,000 civilizations began to crack. Kael Orion was not brave. He was not reckless. He was tired of negotiating shipping corridors that shifted weekly, tired of memorizing alien honor codes that contradicted each other, tired of watching titanic empires grind entire species into trade margins. He worked as a cultural liaison on Helios Spire, a rotating megastructure floating at the intersection of 5 interstellar trade lanes. Humans called it a station. Everyone else called it the knife. If you slipped here, your career ended. Sometimes your species did too. The day the Titan Queen arrived, Kael was standing in line blue, holding a slate of meaningless trade grievances. And then the sound vanished. Not faded, vanished. No rumble of fusion drives. No chatter in 100 dialects. Even the station's magnetic stabilizers seemed to inhale. A shadow stretched across the atrium, and every species present reacted the same way. They bowed. They flattened their ears. They folded limbs, spines, membranes, and egos into the smallest shapes they could manage, because the Titan Queen did not walk. She descended. Her people were not tall. They were monumental, engineered through epochs of selective gravitic evolution to thrive in crushing atmospheres. Her armor was grown, not forged, with living crystal plates that shifted color based on ambient threat analysis. She was called Serathiel the Undisputed, architect of the collapse wars, the sovereign who erased 3 hegemonies by withholding favor. Her presence altered pressure gradients. It made organs ache. It made memory stutter. And Kael said the wrong thing. He didn't mean to. That's the cruelest part. A minor Draxian diplomat fainted directly into Kael's shoulder. The slate slipped. Kael bent to catch it. When he stood, Serathiel was already looking at him. Not at the slate. At his face. And something broke in Kael's brain. He didn't see the Empire Breaker. He didn't see the Conqueror of Moons. He saw loneliness. The microfractures in her living armor pulsed faintly. The scars of orbital lance fire had never been regrown. The way the gravity warped slightly around her joints suggested pain that had never healed. Before Kael could stop himself, the words escaped. "You are beautiful." One sentence, one human breath, and a silence so deep it felt heavier than vacuum. Every translator node on Helios Spire froze mid-conversion. Security drones stalled mid-trajectory. The Titan Queen did not blink. She lowered her head, not enough to be a bow, just enough to look Kael directly in the eyes. No one had ever spoken to her without a script, without ritual, without fear. "What did you say?" her voice asked, not aloud, but inside every skull present. Kael swallowed. His throat burned. His career was already over. His life might follow. "I said you are beautiful," he repeated. Not louder, not braver, just honest. You'd think someone would have tackled him. You'd think station defenses would have atomized him on the spot. Instead, Serathiel's expression changed. Not to rage, not to contempt, to confusion. The Titan Queen, who had stared down armadas, looked uncertain. And across Heliospire, every sensor, recorder, and diplomatic core registered a reality deviation they had no protocol for, because the galaxy had prepared for war, for conquest, for annihilation. It had never prepared for admiration. Hold on, before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. And while you're typing, understand this. What Kael Orion had just done wasn't romantic. It wasn't heroic. It was treason against fear itself. And the Titan Queen had not yet decided how to punish it. Serathiel raised one massive hand toward Kael, and Heliospire's emergency cores began spinning up for a station-wide evacuation. The Titan Queen's hand never touched him. That was the first anomaly. Every historical record showed Serathiel executing offenders within 3 heartbeats. Vaporization, implosion, gravitational inversion. Choose your ending. Yet here she stood, towering, silent, her palm hovering a meter from Kael Orion's face, while Heliospire's alarms died in their own throats. The signal to evacuate never came. Kael felt the pressure field around her shift. It was like standing near a star that had decided not to burn you. His mind screamed to kneel. His body refused. Explain, her voice said, still inside every skull, softer now, almost curious. Kael's mouth went dry. He realized with distant horror that the entire atrium was recording again. Millions would see this moment. The human who tried to flirt with extinction. I wasn't explaining anything, he said. I was stating a fact. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone fainted loudly. The station AI flagged 38 cardiac arrests. Serathiel's eyes glimmered emerald, not in anger but recalibration. Beauty is a classification of biological fertility markers, she replied. My form was engineered for warfare endurance. Kael shook his head before he could stop himself. Micro cliffhanger. No, he said. Beauty is the moment something makes you forget you're afraid. That line hadn't been planned. It surprised him as much as it stunned the crowd. Serathiel withdrew her hand. That alone made history. She turned slightly, scanning the hall, the bowed figures, the trembling merchants. You fear me, she said, not accusingly. You have feared me since my ascension. Yes, Kael answered, because fear is the only story anyone's ever told about you. Her gaze snapped back to him. And what story would you tell, liaison human? Kael swallowed again. Every cultural training module screamed at him to deflect, to praise her victories, to cite treaties. Instead, exhaustion made him honest. I tell them you walked into a room where everyone expected a storm, he said, and instead of thunder, you asked why no one ever mentioned the sky. A murmur spread. Translators lagged, scrambling to interpret metaphor into incompatible emotional spectra. Serathiel was silent so long that diplomats began transmitting emergency override codes. Then she laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly. It sounded like tectonic plates learning to forgive each other. You are dangerous, human, she said. Your species constructs weapons from words. Only because no one listens to us otherwise, Kael replied. Instead of striking him down, Serathiel dismissed the guard drones with a single gesture. Defense turrets retracted. The station exhaled. Walk with me, she commanded. Kael stared. Where? Anywhere you are not required to kneel, she said. He should have refused. Protocol dictated safeguards. But humans were never great with protocol. He stepped forward, and something fundamental shifted in the crowd. A ripple of disbelief. The Titan Queen did not demand submission. She permitted companionship. As they moved, Serathiel's gravitic aura adjusted, lightening so Kael could breathe. You perceive beyond function, she said. We're a mess, Kael answered. But sometimes the mess is the point. They passed under spires of bioluminescent glass. Traders slowly rose from their bows. Why did you say it? Serathiel asked. Because you look like someone who hasn't been seen in a very long time. Her armor shimmered erratically. I am seen by every civilization. You're observed, Kael corrected. Her steps slowed. My kind does not require being seen, she said. Everyone does, Kael replied. She stopped walking. The Titan Queen lowered herself until her towering face was level with his. Gravity bent. Glass trembled. If you are wrong, she said, your species will answer for this. Kael met her gaze. If I'm right, your empire won't need to. For a breathless moment, the future balanced on a sentence. Then Serathiel straightened. You will attend my conclave, she announced, as my guest. The word guest detonated across the quadrant, because the Titan conclave was not a meeting. It was a verdict chamber. Kael felt his knees weaken. That's generous. It is unprecedented, she corrected. As she turned away, she paused, just long enough for only him to hear. You have named a hunger in me, Serathiel whispered. The Titan Queen had just invited a human into the chamber where empires were unmade. None of the gathered species understood yet that this invitation was not mercy, but a crack in the universe itself, a flaw where something ancient would soon bleed through, rewriting treaties, hierarchies, and every comfortable assumption humanity had about being small and terribly, gloriously irreversible. The Titan Conclave did not convene in a hall. It consumed a world. Kael Orion learned this as Serathiel's war barge tore a hole through subspace and unfolded above the dead moon of Varkesh. The moon had been hollowed millennia earlier, turned into a spherical tribunal chamber large enough to hold species that measured meetings in kilometers rather than meters. Miniature stars burned inside containment lattices, lighting the arena with artificial dawns that rose and died every few seconds. Kael stood on a floating platform, trying not to vomit as gravity vectors shifted around him like weather. Across the void, 12 thrones materialized, each carved from the native material of its ruler's homeworld. Bone plasma, living coral, magnetized dust. Serathiel's throne grew last, emerald crystal extruding from nothing, forming a seat that could have crushed mountains. "You may still kneel," one of the lesser monarchs projected, a many-eyed being of liquid metal. Kael shook his head. "I was invited as a guest." A tremor rippled through the chamber. Serathiel's gaze cut sideways. "Guest stand." No one argued after that. The conclave began with accusations. The Multhery Hive accused the Titans of market manipulation through intimidation. The Cloud Synod accused them of destabilizing trade corridors. The Iron Regencies accused them of engineering fear itself as a weaponized resource. Serathiel listened, silent, enormous. Then she gestured to Kael. "Speak." Every throne rotated toward him. Kael's implants screamed overload warnings. He was a human liaison, not a statesman, not a warrior, not a prophet. He was a man who once sold antique radios on Luna to pay for college. "I don't know your wars," he began. "I don't know your bloodlines. But I know what I saw on Helios Spire. You're all terrified of her. Not because she conquers, but because she doesn't need to." Several rulers hissed or flared. Reactions cascaded. "The Titan Empire doesn't take territory," Kael continued. "It withholds recognition. You exist in a system where status is survival. She doesn't erase you. She makes you irrelevant." The Iron Regent pulsed crimson. "That is conquest by another name." Kael nodded. "Maybe. Or maybe it's loneliness scaled to the size of galaxies." Serathiel's armor brightened. The chamber temperature dropped. "You presume motive," the Regent snapped. "No," Kael said quietly. "I'm describing a wound." A silence heavier than vacuum settled. Kael felt sweat bead along his spine. "I watched you all bow to her," he said. "Not because you respect her, but because none of you can imagine standing beside her." The Cloud Synod crackled. "Your species is insignificant. Why should your interpretation matter?" Kael met the storm of eyes. "Because humans are the only ones who still believe admiration is not surrender." A murmur rippled. Serathiel finally rose. Her throne dissolved beneath her as she stepped forward, each movement rippling gravity through the chamber. "For eons," she said, "I have been defined by my capacity to end civilizations. You imply I am defined by my capacity to be seen." Kael nodded. "Everyone deserves to be more than their worst story." The Multhery Hive emitted static laughter. "You risk extinction for sentiment." "Human specialty," Kael replied. Serathiel regarded him. "What do you seek in exchange for this audacity?" He hadn't prepared for that. The chamber waited. "Permission," he said at last, "to tell a different story about you." The Iron Regent slammed its throne, sending a shockwave across the void. "Unacceptable. The Titan Queen is a strategic constant." Serathiel raised one hand. The Regent froze mid-vibration. Time snarled around its form. "You will be silent," she said. She turned back to Kael. "Tell me your story, human." Kael drew a shaking breath. Once there was a giant who learned that being feared meant never being alone, but also never being loved. So the giant built a universe where no one could ever get close enough to hurt her again. It worked. Until today. Several thrones dimmed. Serathiel closed her eyes. The gravity in the chamber softened, as if the moon leaned in. "When you called me beautiful," she said, "you violated 10,000 years of conditioning." "That's not a crime." Kael answered. It's an invitation. Her eyes opened. Then hear my decree. All rulers braced. The Titan Empire will enter a moratorium on fear-based diplomacy. All future engagements will include bilateral cultural envoys, beginning with this human. The chamber erupted. Energy signatures spiked. Emergency protocols flared. Kael felt his heart pound against his ribs. He had just been named the first human envoy. The first attempt on Kael Orion's life came before the echo of Serathiel's decree had finished fading through the conclave chamber. A needle of compressed null matter sheared past his left ear, leaving the air screaming where his skull should have been. He dropped instinctively, gravity twisting as the Titan Queen's field snapped into a protective shell around him. The Iron Regent convulsed on its throne, vents blazing. The human destabilizes the balance. It roared across every frequency at once. This farce ends now. Serathiel moved. It was not a charge. It was a correction. Space folded as if embarrassed by the Regent's defiance. Her hand closed around the Iron Regent's core matrix, a tangle of molten code and ferromagnetic memory. She did not crush it. She did something far worse. She released it. The Regent's system stuttered, suddenly cut off from the gravitational authority they had depended on for centuries. Its throne dimmed. Its glow shrank. The being that had cowed star systems found itself subject to ordinary physics. You may learn, Serathiel said. What is to exist without terror as your currency? She set the Iron Regent back onto its throne like an afterthought. The conclave dissolved into chaos. Monarchs began transmitting emergency accords, calling fleets, rewriting doctrines in real time. Kael was hauled to his feet by invisible forces and ushered into a protective corridor of warped space-time that only Serathiel could maintain. You just made me a target for half the galaxy, Kael said. Only half, she replied. They emerged into a transit nexus deep within the war barge. Here, the walls were alive, latticed with bioluminescent veins that pulsed in rhythm with Serathiel's neural patterns. Kael felt as if he were walking inside a thought. Why protect me? He asked. You don't owe me anything. I owe you an answer, Serathiel said. Your words created dissonance. My empire is structured to eliminate dissonance. That sounds lonely, Kael said. It is efficient, she corrected, then paused. It is also empty. They reached a chamber that overlooked a swirling hyperspatial rift, a controlled storm used to power the war barge. Serathiel dismissed her guards with a gesture that bent probability until obedience became inevitable. Human, she said. Do you know what it is to be engineered? Kael leaned against the railing, watching light tear itself apart below. We do that too. To machines. To animals. Sometimes to ourselves. I was not born, Serathiel said. I was authored. My species sculpted me to be an apex presence. My cells respond to threat with amplification. My mind converts uncertainty into dominance. So you were built to win, Kael said. I was built to remove alternatives. She turned to him. Your compliment disrupted that architecture. It created an internal variable without an associated suppression routine. Kael rubbed his face. You're saying I broke your brain by being nice. Her mouth curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. You introduced inefficiency. That's kind of our brand. An alert rippled through the chamber. Kael's implants lit up with red glyphs. Multiple hostile signatures inbound. The war barge AI intoned. Coalition vessels forming interdiction net. They're not waiting, Kael said. They're going to try to erase you before this change spreads. Serathiel's eyes blazed. They will fail. Not if they hit the conclave delegates too, Kael replied. They'll frame it as containment. For a moment Serathiel was silent. Then her posture changed, subtle but seismic, like a mountain deciding to walk into the sea. You see patterns beyond fear, she said. You are not merely an envoy. You are a catalyst. Kael felt cold settle in his stomach. Catalysts get used up. Not if protected by inevitability, Serathiel replied. The war barge shuddered as the first wave of interdiction fire struck its shields. Space outside the viewport lit with streaks of annihilation energy. The coalition had come prepared. Tell me what to do, Serathiel said. The Titan Queen of a million conquests had just asked a human liaison for strategy. Kael stared at the unfolding battle, then back at her. You can't win this by terrifying them, he said. You have to show them something scarier. And that is hope, Kael said. If you survive this without crushing them, they'll realize fear isn't the only way to stay relevant. Another blast rocked the chamber. Alarm spiraled. Serathiel lifted her gaze to the battlefield, emerald light flaring across her armor. Then let us become terrifying in a new way. The coalition strike force emerged from folded space like a school of razors. 30 capital vessels, each carrying the insignia of species that had once bowed to the Titans. They spread into an interdiction lattice, designed to isolate Serathiel's war barge from every possible escape vector. Kael felt the deck vibrate beneath his boots as shield harmonics ramped to catastrophic thresholds. Serathiel stood at the viewport, not issuing orders, simply observing. Her presence alone orchestrated the battle. Weapon nodes unfolded from the hull like petals from a lethal flower. Gravity wells spun into place, warping the geometry of incoming fire. They're afraid, Kael said. They are decisive, Serathiel corrected. No, he replied. They wouldn't bring this many ships unless they thought this was their only chance. A missile cluster detonated against the shields, releasing a cloud of nanite disassemblers. The war barge responded by altering local constants. The nanites unraveled into inert dust, their physics no longer supported. That's terrifying, Kael said, but it's also exactly what they expect. Serathiel turned to him. Then instruct me in the unexpected. Kael's thoughts raced. Humans had never beaten empires through strength. They did it through stories, through reframing the impossible until it became inevitable. Open your channels, he said. Her eyes narrowed. They will attempt intrusion. Let them, Kael replied. Let everyone listen. For a heartbeat, Serathiel hesitated. Then she gestured. The war barge broadcast arrays flared to life, projecting her presence across every spectrum. This time, she did not speak with thunder. This is Serathiel. Her voice carried, stripped of psychic coercion. You have come to end me because I have frightened you for generations. I will not deny that history. I will only end it. The coalition fleet slowed, uncertainty rippling through its formation. I have been an empire of inevitability, she continued. Today I choose to be an empire of restraint. A beam lanced from a Molthari dreadnought, grazing the shields. Serathiel did not retaliate. They will think this is weakness, Kael murmured. Then let them be wrong slowly, she replied. She turned inward, communing with systems that dwarfed comprehension. The war barge's weapons folded away. Gravity wells collapsed. In their place, containment fields blossomed, capturing incoming fire rather than annihilating its source. Across the void, coalition captains shouted, recalculated, hesitated. Kael leaned closer to the viewport, hard hammering. You're not defending yourself. You're defending them. Serathiel inclined her head. Fear is the only inheritance I have ever offered. I am changing the will. A second wave of fire struck. Instead of shattering shields, it vanished into shimmering pockets of folded spacetime, then reappeared harmlessly 1,000 kilometers off course. Disengage, someone transmitted on an open band. She's not fighting back. The Iron Regent's crippled vessel lurched forward, broadcasting static-laced fury. This is deception. She is harvesting you. Serathiel turned her gaze upon it, but her voice remained gentle. I harvested you when you needed me to be a monster. You do not need me to be one anymore. Silence. One by one, coalition vessels powered down primary weapons. Not all of them. Enough. Kael felt his legs weaken. You're winning, he whispered. I am not winning, Serathiel said. I am ending the contest. A transmission cut through the din, encoded in ancient Titan cipher. Queen, the voice said, old and weary. Your deviation destabilizes our dominion. Serathiel closed her eyes. It liberates it. She terminated the call. The battlefield settled into a fragile ceasefire. Broken formations drifted. Emergency beacons pulsed. Kael exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping him. You just dismantled a coalition with Mercy. Her armor dimmed to a softer green. Mercy is merely fear reconfigured. An alert chimed in Kael's implants. Unauthorized access attempt. He spun. Someone's trying to piggyback on your broadcast. Allow it, Serathiel said. The signal resolved into a human face, gray-haired, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. This is Director Hale of the Terran Accord. The man said. Kael, what have you done? Kael swallowed. I think I just got promoted. Hale stared at Serathiel's towering form behind him. Queen Serathiel, humanity does not authorize. You authorize nothing here. Serathiel interrupted. Your envoy has demonstrated a strategic paradigm that supersedes authorization. Hale's jaw tightened. You are redefining interstellar power dynamics. Kael stepped forward. Director, this is bigger than treaties. We just proved fear isn't the only way to keep the galaxy together. The channel went dead. Serathiel regarded Kael. Your people will resist this. They always do, he said. Then they adapt. She turned back to the viewport, watching coalition ships retreat. Then let adaptation begin. News of the non-battle spread faster than any weapon ever built. Within hours, data streams across the quadrant replayed the same impossible footage. The Titan Queen standing unopposed while her enemies lowered their guns. Kael Orion watched the feeds from a quiet observation deck, his hands still trembling despite the absence of danger. The war barge had entered neutral drift near a blue dwarf star, its massive systems idling like a slumbering god. Serathiel stood beside him, gazing at the star as if it were a question rather than an object. You are now the most discussed human in history, she said. Kael snorted. That's not a comforting statistic. Your species will seek to classify you, Serathiel continued. They will attempt to contain the variable you represent. I've been contained my whole career, Kael replied. I usually slip through the cracks. A new feed flared into existence. The cloud synod's emblem spiraled open, revealing a council of vaporous intelligences. Titan Queen, they intoned. Your restraint has created market instability. Species once aligned by fear now consider autonomy. Serathiel inclined her head. Autonomy is not instability. It is choice. Choice fractures cohesion, the synod warned. So does terror, Kael said before he could stop himself. The vaporous council hesitated, then cut the feed. Kael rubbed his temples. I'm really starting to get why people are afraid of you. You make the universe rethink itself. That is not fear, Serathiel said. That is labor. An alarm chimed, softer than the ones before. Internal, not hostile. The war barge's biolattice pulsed erratically. What's wrong? Kael asked. My systems are experiencing recursive divergence, Serathiel replied. The suppression architectures embedded in my cognition are decaying. You mean your programming is failing? Yes. Kael felt a chill. Because of me. Because of choice, she corrected. Your presence accelerates the process. A human medical officer entered the chamber, eyes wide at Serathiel's proximity. Sir, Terran Command requests your immediate extraction. They say the Titans are becoming unpredictable. Kael looked from the officer to Serathiel. I'm not leaving. The officer blinked. Sir, she's not a bomb, Kael said. She's a person. Serathiel studied him. Your refusal will be interpreted as defection. Then interpret it however you need, Kael replied. The officer backed away, transmitting frantic updates. You bind your fate to mine, Serathiel said. Kael smiled faintly. I did that the moment I opened my mouth on Helios Spire. Another feed burst open, this one chaotic, patched together from dozens of species. Faces, mandibles, eyes, plasma clouds all overlapping in shared panic. Titan Queen, a chorus demanded. What is your intent? Serathiel considered. To discover what I am without fear. That answer detonated across networks. Your empire will collapse, a voice warned. It will transform, Serathiel replied. Kael felt the deck shift subtly as the war barge altered course, not toward any strategic point, but into open interstellar void. Where are we going? He asked. Nowhere, Serathiel said, for the first time. My trajectory is not a threat vector. They stood together in the quiet, watching the blue dwarf flare. I never thought a compliment could do this, Kael said. It was not the compliment, Serathiel replied. It was the recognition. A new transmission cut in, this one heavily encrypted. Director Hale again, face taut with controlled anger. Kael, you are ordered to return. You are not authorized to participate in Titan internal restructuring. Kael met his gaze. With respect, sir, authorization is obsolete. Hale's eyes flicked to Serathiel. You are undermining every power structure we rely on. Serathiel leaned closer to the camera. Your structures rely on my terror. You may build new ones. The feed terminated. Kael let out a long breath. You realize they're going to try to isolate you. Sanctions, embargoes, information blackouts. They already are, Serathiel said. And if they succeed? Serathiel's gaze returned to the star. Then I will learn what it is to be alone without fear. Kael felt a knot form in his chest. That's not something anyone should have to learn. She looked at him. Then remain. He didn't hesitate. I will. Outside, the war barge glided through unclaimed space. No longer a spear, but a question mark, dragging the galaxy behind it whether the galaxy was ready or not. Isolation began as silence. The Titan Empire's trade corridors went dark one by one, not from attack, but from refusal. Ports that once begged for Serathiel's presence now shuttered their gates. Kael watched diplomatic channels dissolve into empty placeholders, whole civilizations deciding that absence was safer than transformation. You expected this, Kael said. Serathiel nodded. Fear is simpler than hope. Weeks passed inside the war barge, time measured by the slow drift of stars. The living walls dulled, their bioluminescent veins pulsing more erratically as Serathiel's internal architectures continued to unravel. Kael began documenting the changes like a cultural anthropologist trapped inside a god. Her voice lost its coercive resonance. Her presence no longer warped gravity unless she consciously commanded it. The Titan Queen was becoming finite. Does it hurt? Kael asked one cycle as she paused mid-corridor, armor flickering. Yes, she said without hesitation. I am shedding certainties. A human courier shuttle finally pierced the isolation field, broadcasting civilian codes. Kael recognized the pilot, a freckled woman named Mara who used to smuggle antique films between colonies. Kael, you idiot, Mara said when the channel opened. Do you know what you've done to the markets? He smiled. You should see the other guy. Mara sobered. They're calling it the fracture. The Titan supply chains powered half the frontier. Now everyone's scrambling to build local autonomy. Some worlds are thriving. Others are starving. Serathiel listened, expression unreadable. People are scared, Mara continued. Not of you. Of themselves. Kael turned to Serathiel. This was never going to be clean. I do not regret it, Serathiel said, but I acknowledge the cost. The feed cut, leaving the chamber heavy with unspoken consequences. Kael found her later in a private sanctum, a place that had once been a tactical core. Now it was stripped bare, a vast circular room with a single gravity node at its center. Why here, he asked. This was where I optimized extinction probabilities, Serathiel said. I need to remember what I am choosing not to be. She deactivated the node. Gravity equalized. For the first time, she and Kael stood under the same physical laws. He laughed softly. You are shorter without the universe bending around you. Her lips twitched. And you are louder. Another message arrived, this one encoded with Titan sigils. A council of her own people, their voices overlapping in rigid harmony. Sovereign, your deviation endangers our engineered destiny. Return to compliance or abdicate. Serathiel closed her eyes as the chorus pressed on. We were designed to rule, they insisted. You are unraveling our supremacy. She terminated the feed. Kael felt a wave of anger on her behalf. They don't get to decide who you are. They believe they do, she replied. They authored me. Then author yourself, Kael said. She studied him. Humans author themselves into chaos. We call it living. A tremor passed through the war barge. System stuttered, then stabilized. Kael's implants flagged a surge of internal reconfiguration. "What did you just do?" he asked. "I removed the final suppression layer," Serathiel said. "My kind ensured I could never disobey my foundational imperatives. They are gone." Kael stared at her. "That's irreversible." "Yes." A long silence followed. "You're not afraid?" Kael asked. "I am terrified," Serathiel replied, "which means I am no longer inevitable." Another transmission forced its way in, this one raw and unfiltered. A Titan commander, massive even by their standards, eyes blazing. "Serathiel, return. Your weakness invites annihilation. Humanity will not shield you when the coalition strikes again." Kael stepped forward. "We're not shielding her. We're standing with her." The commander scoffed. "Your species barely holds its own borders." Serathiel moved beside Kael, not looming, simply present. "Then observe us holding something greater than borders." She cut the channel. The war barge drifted in the void, its former empire in fragments behind it, its future unwritten ahead. Kael felt the weight of it all settle into his bones. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Serathiel nodded slowly. "Then remain." "I'm not going anywhere," Kael replied. The second coalition arrived without warning, not as an armada, but as a verdict. Hundreds of microfleets folded into the void around the Titan war barge, each too small to threaten her alone, yet together, forming a net, so dense it looked like a swarm of stars. Kael felt the familiar vibration through the deck, and knew this was different. There was no bluster this time, no declarations, only quiet intent. "They've learned," Kael said. Serathiel nodded. "They no longer fear me. They fear what I represent." The first salvos were surgical, precision lances aimed not at weapons, but at the war barge biolattice. Living corridors went dark. Systems screamed in unfamiliar tones as parts of Serathiel's ship died, without violence. Kael's console flared with cascading failure warnings. "They're trying to amputate you," he said. "Yes," Serathiel replied calmly. "They seek to leave only the myth." She closed her eyes and extended her awareness across the ship. Kael felt the pressure shift, not crushing but encompassing, like a deep ocean lifting him without drowning. For the first time since Helios Spire, he felt her power fully, but shaped, restrained, intimate. "I can end them," she said. "Even now." "I know," Kael replied. "But if you do, nothing changes." Another corridor collapsed into vacuum. Emergency field slammed into place a heartbeat too late. Kael staggered as decompression alarms wailed. "Then tell me what changes," Serathiel said. Kael's mind raced. They couldn't outgun the swarm without becoming the monster again. They couldn't flee. The coalition had sealed every vector. "We let them board," he said. Serathiel opened her eyes. "That will kill you." "Probably," Kael admitted, "but it might save you." Before she could argue, he keyed the internal broadcast system, opening every channel within the war barge. "To anyone who can hear me," Kael said, voice shaking but steady. "This is Kael Orion. I'm just a human liaison, but I'm asking you to do something insane. I'm asking you to stop fighting, to put down your weapons, and come see who you're trying to erase." Serathiel watched him, something like wonder in her gaze. "They'll never listen," she said. "They will if they hear you not commanding them," Kael replied. "But standing with me." Serathiel inhaled. The war barge's gravity equalized, its defensive field softening. Airlocks along the hull irised open. Boarding craft poured in like insects into a wounded Titan. Kael felt his pulse in his throat as hostile boots clanged on the deck outside the chamber. Weapon fire echoed in distant corridors, frantic, uncertain. "They're here," he whispered. Serathiel stepped closer to him. No aura, no distortion, just a towering being choosing vulnerability. "If you fall," she said, "this experiment ends." Kael smiled weakly. "Then let's not fall." The doors blew inward, torn apart by plasma charges. A dozen coalition soldiers flooded the chamber, weapons raised. They froze when they saw Serathiel standing unshielded, Kael at her side. "This is Containment Team 7. A commander barked. Titan entity, you are ordered to submit to disassembly. Serathiel did not move. Kael stepped forward, hands empty. You're not here to save the galaxy, he said. You're here to save yourselves from change. The commander sneered. You're a traitor to your species. Kael shook his head. I'm the only one acting like one. A nervous twitch ran through the squad. Someone fired. The bolt went wide, scorching the wall. Serathiel flinched. Not in fear, but in restraint. Enough, she said softly. Her voice was no longer a weapon. It was a presence. The soldiers hesitated, weapons wavering. You were taught that I am inevitability, Serathiel continued. I am not. I am choosing not to be. The commander's hand shook. This is psychological warfare. Kael took another step. No, this is what it looks like when the monster stops roaring. Silence spread, contagious. One soldier lowered their rifle. Then another. The commander stared, realization dawning too late. Stand down, he whispered. Outside the chamber, the firing ceased. Kael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Serathiel. You just survived without killing anyone. She nodded, eyes bright. And you survived telling them the truth. The war barge drifted, wounded but alive, surrounded by a fleet that no longer knew what it was supposed to destroy. The ceasefire did not feel like peace. It felt like a room where everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would blink first. Kael Orion walked the scarred corridors of the Titan war barge, stepping over melted plating and frozen blood from species he could not name, wondering how many histories were quietly rewriting themselves around him. Serathiel moved beside him, slower now, her once constant gravitic distortion reduced to a faint shimmer. She looked less like a sovereign and more like a survivor. They will not leave, she said. They don't know how, Kael replied. None of us were taught what to do when the villain stops being one. A message pinged across Kael's implants. A summit request. Open channel, galaxy-wide. They're calling it the Assembly of Uncertain Futures. Kael read aloud. That's honest, at least. Serathiel considered. You will speak for me. Kael laughed nervously. I barely survived a boarding party. You survived by being human, she said. That is your qualification. The assembly convened in a shared simulation space, a neutral digital amphitheater, shaped by no single species physics. Kael found himself standing on translucent stone, Serathiel towering at his side, while avatars of hundreds of civilizations flickered into being around them. The Iron Regent appeared last, diminished, its once blazing core now a dull ember. This gathering itself is proof of destabilization, it rasped. We are negotiating with what we once feared. Kael stepped forward. That's not destabilization. That's growth. Murmurs rippled. A Molthari delegate hissed. The Titan supply network has collapsed. Entire economies teeter. Serathiel inclined her head. I will share Titan infrastructure schematics freely. Let your worlds become self-sustaining. The delegates erupted, some in outrage, others in disbelief. You would dismantle your strategic advantage, the Cloud Senate demanded. I no longer require advantage, Serathiel replied. I require meaning. Kael felt the weight of that word vibrate through the chamber. A human representative cut in. Director Hale once more, face tight with restrained fury. This is reckless. The Titans have anchored stability for centuries. By terrifying everyone into obedience, Kael said. That's not stability. That's stagnation with better branding. Hale glared. You don't speak for humanity. No, Kael agreed. But I speak as one. The Iron Regent's avatar flickered. And what of us who built our empires on the Titan's shadow? We will fall. Serathiel's gaze softened, then fall into something new. Silence. One by one, delegates began transmitting proposals. Shared energy grids. Mutual defense pacts without coercive clauses. Cultural exchanges instead of tribute routes. The language of domination slowly gave way to the language of collaboration. Kael felt dizzy. This is actually happening. Serathiel looked down at him. You called me beautiful. This is the consequence. A private channel opened in Kael's mind, encrypted in Titan neurocode. There is something you must know, Serathiel said. What is it? My people will not forgive this, she replied. They will attempt to remove me. Kael's stomach dropped. When? Soon. The assembly continued around them, oblivious. We can protect you, Kael said. Serathiel shook her head. You can protect the idea, not the architect. What are you saying? Kael asked. She knelt, bringing her eyes level with his, not in dominance, but in intimacy. Empires are not dismantled by rulers. They are dismantled by stories. You are the story now. Kael's throat tightened. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I, she said gently. A sudden distortion tore through the simulation. Titan signatures spiked across Kael's feeds. They're here, he whispered. The war barge shuddered in the real world. Internal alarms bled into the virtual chamber, overlaying reality with warning glyphs. Serathiel stood. My people have come to reclaim inevitability. Kael reached for her arm. Don't go alone. She looked at him, something like sorrow in her eyes. If I remain, the galaxy will fracture along me. If I fall, the fracture becomes a seam. The chamber around them erupted in panic as delegates realized what was happening. End the assembly, Serathiel commanded. The simulation began to dissolve. Serathiel, Kael said, voice breaking. You're not alone anymore. She touched his forehead, not with gravity, not with power, but with simple contact. And that is why I must do this. The Titan war barge shook as if the universe itself were trying to tear it apart. In Kael Orion's implants, red diagnostics layered over every sense, mapping breaches, casualties, failures that had once been impossible to imagine. The Titan loyalists were inside, not boarding, but phasing through localized gravity fractures only their species had ever mastered. Serathiel, they're cutting through your core lattice, Kael shouted. I know, she replied calmly. They're not here to kill me. They are here to restore me. That terrified him more than death ever could. They reached the central nexus, where Serathiel had once optimized extinction probabilities. Now the chamber glowed with unstable light, the biolattice peeling back as Titan engineers rewrote her systems from the inside. Stand down, Sovereign. A chorus of Titan minds thundered through the chamber. Your deviation threatens our engineered destiny. Serathiel stepped forward, gravity surging instinctively before she reined it in. Your destiny was to survive, she said, not to dominate. You were authored to rule, the chorus insisted. You are erasing our supremacy. Kael moved to her side, ignoring the warnings screaming in his head. Supremacy isn't survival, he said. It's fear wearing a crown. The Titans focused on him, ancient intelligences evaluating a human who had become an anomaly in their perfect system. Remove the catalyst, they decided. A pulse of null gravity hurled Kael across the chamber. He hit the deck hard, air tearing from his lungs. He dimly saw Serathiel surge toward him, power flaring in reflex. No, Kael gasped. Don't. She froze, every instinct warring across her form. The Titans advanced, lattice filaments spearing into her armor, rewriting, reclaiming. This is how empires persist, the chorus intoned. By correcting deviation. Kael forced himself upright, pain blooming like fire in his ribs. He didn't have weapons. He didn't have authority. He had a voice that had already changed everything once. You can't correct choice, he said, shouting into the storm. You can only erase it. And if you do, you erase yourselves with it. Serathiel screamed, not in agony, in defiance. Her gravitic field spiked, not outward, but inward, collapsing her own suppression architectures in a final cascade. The Titan's control thread snapped like spider silk in a hurricane. For a heartbeat, she was brighter than any star. Then she fell to her knees. The chorus faltered, suddenly fragmented, their perfect consensus shattered by something they had never modeled, refusal. Serathiel looked at Kael, eyes dimming. They cannot restore me now, she said softly, but they can end me. No, Kael whispered. We'll get you out. There's no out, she replied. Only onward. The war barge groaned as loyalist vessels were repelled by coalition forces outside, drawn back by the story Kael had unleashed. The galaxy was watching, waiting, I was built to be a monument, Serathiel said. You taught me to be a moment. Her armor began to dissolve into motes of emerald light, each fragment carrying centuries of Titan knowledge, culture, fear, and hope. Take this, she said, pressing her forehead to his. Data surged into Kael's implants, overwhelming, impossible. Distribute it freely. Let no one ever become inevitable again. Tears blurred his vision. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are, she replied, her form unraveled, not in violence, but in release, becoming a storm of light that flooded the Nexus, then streamed outward through the war barge, into space, into every network still open to listen. Across the quadrant, worlds felt it, a Titan empire dissolving into shared memory, an empire choosing to end itself. The loyalist Titans collapsed where they stood, their command hierarchies suddenly empty, their purpose stripped bare. Kael lay on the deck long after the light faded, the war barge silent around him, no longer a weapon but a relic. Weeks later, he stood on Helios Spire again, the same atrium where this had begun. The station buzzed with sound this time, not fearful but alive. Traders argued. Children laughed. Species that had never stood together before now shared air, without shrinking. A memorial had been erected where Serathiel had once entered. Not a statue, a window opening onto the stars. Kael addressed the crowd. His voice carried across 100 worlds. She was called a monster. She chose to be a bridge. The galaxy will never be the same, not because she ruled us, but because she trusted us. He paused, letting the moment breathe. And if this story meant something to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who still thinks fear is the only way to lead, and subscribe to HFY Soundscape so we can keep telling the stories that change us. Above him, ships moved freely through the Nexus, not in dread, but in wonder, carrying the light of a Titan Queen who had learned, at last, what it meant to be seen.